Bookman's Weekly, a weekly magazine that was begun in the late 1940s as a vehicle for advertising used and rare books, both books wanted and books for sale. Saul M. Malkin founded A.B. Bookman's Weekly in 1946, and with his wife, Marianne O'Brien Malkin, edited it for a generation. The Malkins sold A.B. in the early 1970s, and it continued in business under the direction of Jake Charnofsky until 1999, when it ceased operation, superseded by the internet. The magazine's editorial content was of interest to the overlapping worlds of used and rare bookselling, research, librarianship, and book collecting. Its front matter consisted of trade news of interest to dealers, collectors, and librarians, and it included a column written by Jacob Blank, providing news, musings, and gossip about the trade. In 1984, Marianne Malkin began to support an annual lecture in honor of her husband, Saul M. Malkin. Michael Winship gave the first Malkin lecture in bibliography under Bookhart's Press auspices, our predecessor organization, at Columbia University in 1985. In time for Saul Malkin to congratulate him on his performance, though Malkin himself was too ill to attend. Indeed, Saul Malkin died in 1986, a few months after Winship had delivered the lecture. Something that's not generally known. In the official biographies of Saul Malkin, we are told that he was Phi Beta Kappa in his junior year at NYU. What we are not generally told is that he was fired from NYU as a senior. He worked in the secondhand book trade on 4th Avenue, and Saul had a mouth. And he was thrown to the wolves by his boss. There were periodic raids on 4th Avenue in those days by the New York City Police Department looking for obscene books like James Joyce's Ulysses. And it was determined that Saul would be fed to the wolves. He was on duty when there was a raid, and he was arrested for selling pornography. And he was dismissed from NYU. He never graduated. One of the sad stories. That was in the 1920s. Saul recovered, went to Europe, had a very interesting and enormously variegated career, which included raising championship dogs, and found himself working for the R. Bowker Company, which produced not only books in print, but publishes weekly. And A.B. Bookman's Weekly was a development of advertisements in the back of Publishers Weekly, which is where where dealers search for books for customers in a very much simpler book trade. Marianne Malkin continued to support Rare Book School, both during our remaining years at Columbia University and since 1992 at the University of Virginia. At some point in the late 1990s, she allowed me to change the name of the lecture she had funded to the Saul M. and Mary Ann O'Brien Malkin Lecture in Bibliography. She came down from New York to attend most of the Malkin lectures that took place before her death at the age of 91 in 2005, and many of you in this audience have met her. She left us half of her residual estate, an amount now totaling about $835,000. It is by far the largest gift to Rare Book School, and one that has had a transforming effect on our history. She was truly a friend of Rare Book School. Malkin lectures, one a year, over the years have included Greer Allen, Nicholas Barker, William P. Barlow Jr., Robert Darnton, Miriam Foote, Christopher DeHamel, Lucia Goldschmidt, James Green, Sylvie Kiefer, Richard Cookta, Catherine Kais Lieb, Marjorie Wynn. Now that is a list, ladies and gentlemen. Our speaker this evening is Mark Dimunation, who is Chief of the Rare Book and Special Collections Division of the Library of Congress and a Rare Book School faculty stalwart. He and John Buchtel have been co-teaching their course, History of the Book 200-2000, since 2002. Mark Dimunation is magic in the classroom, as the 7 online course evaluations for his course testify. My guess is that he currently has the busiest lecture schedule on the rare book circuit in the country, where he is also magic. It is a pleasure to introduce him to you tonight. The title of this lecture, I Cannot Live Without Jefferson's Books, Rebuilding a Foundation Collection at the Library of Congress.
Well, from the sound of the rattle, that means it's working. Can you hear me back there? Good evening. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. There are many hallmarks along one's career to measure whether or not you're moving in the right direction or not. One is when Terry Bellinger knows your name. The second is when you get to attend Rare Book School, class pay attention. Third is when you get to teach with John Buchtel in Rare Book School. And as I've always said, I've always wanted a poster on that damn wall in the hallway. And I was fine until I actually heard the list of former or previous Malcolm lecture speakers and realized the kind of company that I'm finding myself in. And I'm very thrilled to be here tonight. I actually did have the pleasure of meeting Marianne O'Brien Malkin a couple of times when we first started teaching at Rare Book School, and actually had a very lovely and long conversation about choreography books. And enjoyed her immensely, and I'm very pleased to be able to be here tonight to give this talk. Terry keeps accusing me that I've come back to Virginia to steal back the books, although by the time we're finished with our lecture tonight, you'll realize that he's quite wrong, since we paid for the books, and that will be the story that we're telling. Much of my talk tonight is predicated on a belief that I've developed over time, partly through Terry's counsel, I might add, about the nature of our work, in the sense that by their very existence, I have a belief that libraries affirm a belief in a past and make our past in some measure knowable. When we work with rare books and special collections material, and especially when we teach with them, I believe our concern is to gather, preserve, and interpret the physical materials that have traveled through time and culture that allow us to understand the past. My very famous predecessor in my position, Frederick Goff, referred to a personal destiny and called our work, in fact, a personal destiny with the world of the past and the expectations and the hopes of the world to come. Well, that's awfully heady for this boy from Minnesota, but it was a great passion that drove Thomas Jefferson, and I believe very much the spirit of Goff's phrasing informed his own collecting. Jefferson, of course, being one of the great 18th century book collectors in America, certainly, if not in a larger realm, and over a span of 50 years, engineered and built one of the grand monuments to the Enlightenment, his book collection, and finally admitted to the world that he could not live without books. I live and work in the world's largest library. As we like to say, it also happens to be the oldest extant cultural federal institution.